The day before 9 people died, the company that led them onto the mountain posted a video. In that video, one of their own guides knelt down in the snow, dug into the surface with his hands, and pointed at what he described as atypical layering. He used the words weak layer. He told the camera that this kind of structure existed across multiple elevations on the mountain. And then the company posted that video to Instagram, added a caption urging their followers to pay close attention to avalanche forecasts, and went to sleep. The next morning, they led 15 people into that terrain anyway. That video still exists, investigators have it, and it may be the most damaging piece of evidence in what is now one of the most significant criminal cases the American outdoor recreation industry has ever faced. Because it does not just show what happened. It shows what the company knew, in their own words, on camera, with a timestamp, less than 24 hours before the avalanche buried their clients in the snow above Frog Lake. 9 people are now presumed dead. 6 have been identified as a group of mothers connected through their children at a small ski academy near Donner Summit. 2 of them were sisters. 3 of the 4 guides, Blackbird Mountain guides, sent onto that mountain are among the dead. The bodies have not all been recovered. Castle Peak remains sealed, and the criminal investigation that Nevada County prosecutors opened is no longer a preliminary inquiry. It is moving toward a reckoning that could permanently change how backcountry guiding operates in the United States. Here is what the investigation has found so far, and why the evidence is worse than almost anyone in the industry is publicly acknowledging. The timeline begins not on the morning of the avalanche, but 5 days earlier, when California's Sierra Nevada was in the middle of what meteorologists were already calling a historic loading event. The snowpack had been sitting at 60% of its seasonal average for weeks. Thin, hardened, a base of faceted crystals that avalanche scientists describe as a persistent weak layer. This is not an obscure technical term. It is the foundational concept behind the deadliest avalanche conditions that exist. A persistent weak layer is a buried foundation of fragile snow that refuses to bond with the layers above it. It waits. It can wait for days or weeks. And when enough new snow loads onto it, it does not gradually give way. It fractures, explosively across hundreds of meters in fractions of a second. Between February 13th and February 17th, 3 to 6 feet of new snow fell across the Sierra Nevada in 72 hours. Palisades Tahoe recorded 94 inches in 3 days. The Sierra Avalanche Center, which monitors snowpack conditions across this region and publishes daily bulletins read by every professional operating in the backcountry, was watching the new snow stack onto that weak foundation in real time. Their forecasters knew exactly what was happening beneath the surface. The question was not whether avalanches would occur. The question was when and how large and where. On Sunday, February 15th at 6:49 in the morning, the Sierra Avalanche Center issued an avalanche watch. A watch means large avalanches are likely within the next 48 hours. It is not the highest alert level. It is a formal statement that conditions are deteriorating in a way that warrants immediate attention from anyone operating in the mountains. That same morning, 15 people, 11 paying clients and 4 Blackbird Mountain guides, set out for the Frog Lake backcountry huts at 1,600 feet in the Tahoe National Forest. They carried their own food and supplies. The plan was 3 days. They knew there was a watch in effect. They went anyway, which is not itself illegal. Backcountry users enter the mountains under avalanche watches regularly. Professional guides make judgment calls about acceptable risk. That is part of what clients are paying for. But what happened over the next 48 hours moved this case from a tragedy into something that prosecutors believe is a crime. On Monday, February 16th, the Sierra Avalanche Center issued updated forecasts, warning of high-intensity snowfall loading onto known unstable foundations. Snowpack instability was increasing. The center's language was not cautious or hedged, it was direct. That same Monday, Blackbird posted their Instagram video. One of their guides, standing in the snow that was actively burying the weak layer beneath it, documented what he was seeing. Atypical layering. A particularly weak layer across multiple elevations. Pay close attention to avalanche forecasts. Read that again. A professional guide employed by the company that had paying clients on that mountain published a public statement documenting the dangerous snow conditions they were observing, and the company used it as a content opportunity. They filmed it, they edited it, they posted it. The caption told their audience to pay attention to the forecasts. What investigators are now examining is what that video reveals about the company's actual state of knowledge on Monday evening. Because by Tuesday morning, those same forecasts that Blackbird had told their followers to watch carefully had been upgraded to the highest alert level the Sierra Avalanche Center issues. At 5 in the morning on Tuesday, February 18th, the center upgraded the watch to a full avalanche warning. This is not a routine escalation. A warning is the Sierra Avalanche Center's declaration that the situation has crossed a threshold. The specific language they used that morning has since been reviewed by both the criminal investigation and the Cal OSHA workplace safety probe. Natural avalanches were likely. Human-triggered avalanches large enough to bury people were very likely. Travel in avalanche terrain was not recommended, not discouraged, not cautioned against, not recommended only for experts, not recommended. Somewhere in the Frog Lake huts that morning, the Blackbird guides made a decision. The group had been planning to stay 3 days. 2 days had passed. The third day was now a Tuesday morning under a full avalanche warning with a persistent weak layer beneath feet of new snow and a company Instagram post from the previous evening that documented exactly why the conditions were dangerous. They decided to leave. They chose to head for the trailhead, and they chose the northwest route toward Interstate 80, a path with a 60-degree incline, rated the second highest threat level on the avalanche risk scale for that day. A longer alternative route existed. It was harder to navigate in the whiteout conditions that had blanketed the mountain. It carried the second lowest avalanche threat rating. Former visitors to the huts, who know the terrain well, have said the safer road is genuinely more difficult and poor visibility. Investigators are not dismissing that, but they are examining the decision-making process that led 4 professional guides, who had documented dangerous snowpack conditions the previous evening, to choose a high-threat descent route under a full avalanche, warning on a mountain they knew was loaded beyond its capacity to hold. At approximately 11:30 in the morning, the mountain broke. The avalanche ripped across a north-facing slope near Perry Peak. It was roughly 100 yards wide. All 15 people were in its path. What happened in the minutes after the slide is something that the 6 survivors have described to investigators, and that has not been fully reported publicly. The people who were not buried sheltered under a tarp in a stand of trees in blizzard conditions with no cell service. One guide used the emergency satellite function on an iPhone to maintain a 4-hour text exchange with emergency responders through a connection that could barely hold signal. Before help arrived, the survivors had already located 3 of their dead friends in the snow. They had dug, they had searched, they had found them. And they had to stay on that mountain in those conditions for hours, knowing what was under the snow around them, waiting for teams that were fighting their way up through the same avalanche terrain that had just killed their companions. 2 teams of nearly 50 responders deployed from the north and south simultaneously. They rode snowmobiles to within 2 miles of the site, then skied the rest of the way through active avalanche terrain in the dark. By 10 that night, all 6 survivors had been evacuated. The people they left behind have not yet come home. Placer County Sheriff Wayne Wu revealed at a press conference that one of the victims was the spouse of a member of the Tahoe Nordic Search and Rescue Team, the very team that was deployed to recover them. He said, "It has been challenging emotionally for the organization. That is the only public statement that has come close to describing what the responders who went onto that mountain already knew before they arrived." Now here is what the investigation is actually building, and why people inside the legal community who have been watching this case believe the evidence is more serious than the company or its insurers are prepared to acknowledge. American criminal law rarely touches outdoor recreation deaths. The industry has operated for decades under a framework that treats avalanche fatalities as tragic accidents, covered by liability waivers, shielded by the doctrine of assumption of risk, and insulated by the absence of any federal licensing requirement for backcountry guides. If you want to call yourself a backcountry ski guide in the United States and lead paying clients into avalanche terrain, there is nothing stopping you. No federal license, no mandatory certification, no minimum training standard. The Forest Service requires special use permits for operations on federal land, but the Frog Lake huts sit on private property managed by the Truckee Donner Land Trust. That means even the limited oversight the Forest Service provides did not apply to what Blackbird was doing. Nevada County Supervisor Hardy Bullock told the New York Times that essentially anyone can set themselves up as a backcountry guide. The regulatory framework has gaps wide enough, in his words, to ski through. What prosecutors in Nevada County are now testing is whether that framework protects a company that had documented knowledge of dangerous conditions, received a formal government warning recommending against travel in avalanche terrain, and sent paying clients and their own employees into that terrain regardless. Attorney Jeffrey Custian, a ski injury lawyer practicing in Grass Valley, has stated publicly that liability waivers cannot insulate a company against claims of reckless conduct or gross negligence. Under California law, gross negligence requires establishing that the defendant was aware of a serious risk and proceeded in conscious disregard of it. The Instagram video is a time-stamped record of awareness. The avalanche warning is a time-stamped record of what the formal risk assessment was that morning. And 9 people are dead. Cal OSHA's parallel investigation is focused on a different but related question. 3 of the 4 Blackbird guides are among the dead. California's general duty clause requires employers to protect workers from recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious physical harm. If Cal OSHA determines that Blackbird knowingly sent its own employees into terrain that the state's avalanche center had formally declared dangerous that morning, the company faces significant regulatory consequences. More importantly, Cal OSHA's findings will be admissible in the criminal proceeding. The 2 investigations are not running in parallel by accident, they are being coordinated. Nevada County Sheriff Shannon Moon said at her press conference that there were lots of forecasts for the storm and that these were decisions the guide company clearly made. That phrasing was deliberate. Decisions the guide company clearly made, not decisions that circumstances forced, not an unavoidable situation. What the investigation is now trying to establish is the internal decision-making chain within Blackbird on the morning of February 18th. Who made the call to leave the huts? Who chose the northwest route? Was the avalanche warning discussed among the guides before departure? Were the clients told what the warning level was that morning? Were they told that a safer route existed? These are the questions that will determine whether the criminal negligence charge holds, and they are the questions that every current and former Blackbird employee who was not on that mountain is now being asked. The families of the 6 identified victims have asked for privacy. Their joint statement contained 5 words. They trusted their professional guides. That statement was not released as an accusation. It was released as a fact. And it is the fact that sits at the moral and legal center of this entire case. The clients who died were not reckless amateurs who wandered into dangerous terrain on their own. They paid a licensed company staffed by trained professionals to make the decisions about when it was safe to move and where. They outsourced that judgment. And the judgment that was made on the morning of February 18th, under a full avalanche warning, on a high-threat route, after the company's own guide had filmed the dangerous snowpack the previous evening, that judgment has 9 people's names attached to it. Lorraine Adams owns the Mill Valley Coffee Shop. One of the victims came in days before the trip. She came in with her husband and told staff they were going skiing. Adams remembered them saying they would not be back for a while. Turns out, Adams said, we will not see them ever. The Sierra Avalanche Center's director, David Riel, has warned that any proposal to restrict backcountry access will face significant resistance from the outdoor recreation community. He is right. The backcountry skiing world is built on a culture of personal responsibility, self-determination, and the belief that individuals should be free to make their own risk calculations in the mountains. That culture is real, and it is not wrong. But it was built around individual choices made by people accepting risk on their own behalf. It was not built around the assumption that a professional company could document a hazard, receive a government warning, choose a high-risk descent, and then point to that culture as a legal defense when the people who trusted them are dead. The Castle Peak closure runs through mid-March. Recovery teams may need to trigger controlled avalanches with explosives before they can safely reach all of the dead. The persistent weak layer that killed them is still active. Another avalanche warning was issued in the Sierra Nevada this week. The bodies are still on the mountain. The investigation is open. The Instagram video is still online. And the question that neither the guiding industry nor the American legal system has ever had to answer at this scale is now unavoidable. When a company knows the danger, receives the warning, chooses the terrain, and buries its clients in the snow, at what point does the law stop calling it an accident?